When did love blind you to all the warning signs? I never thought love would make me ignore the sound of my own instincts screaming at me. But that's exactly what happened the night I met Daniel. It was at my friend Sophia's birthday party. The music was too loud, the kind that makes the walls throb, and I remember wanting to leave after an hour. Then he walked in, tall, dark hair swept back like he belonged in a magazine, carrying a bottle of wine nobody had asked him to bring. His smile found me instantly, like he'd already decided I was the reason he showed up. "You look like you hate it here," he said, sliding onto the couch beside me. I laughed nervously. Is it that obvious? Only to someone watching you. It should have unnerved me, that line. Instead, it felt flattering, like he saw me when everyone else overlooked me. And when he leaned closer to ask about my drink, I caught the smell of cedar cologne and thought, stupidly, that it smelled like safety. We talked for hours, about books, movies, childhood embarrassments. He remembered details no one else would care about, like the scar on my wrist from falling off my bike at 12, the exact way I take my coffee. By the end of the night, I felt drunk on his attention. Sophia teased me later. "Careful, girl. Guys who notice too much notice for a reason." But I brushed it off. He texted me the next morning before I'd even brushed my teeth. "Last night was the best part of my week. Dinner tonight?" I should have slowed down. Instead, I said yes. Dinner turned into a weekend away. A weekend turned into keys to his apartment. Within 6 weeks, I was basically living there. My friends raised eyebrows. My mom asked, "Isn't this fast?" But Daniel's explanations always smoothed over the doubts. "Why waste time if we know what we want?" he'd say, brushing my hair back, looking at me like I was the only person in the world. And God, I wanted to believe him. After years of half relationships, of men who texted only after midnight, of being the second choice, Daniel felt like the answer to every prayer I hadn't even said out loud. The first warning sign came disguised as a compliment. We were out with some friends of his at a bar. I was telling a story, something silly about my job, and I saw his jaw tighten. Later, in the Uber home, he said softly, "You don't need to talk so much around other guys. You're too beautiful to try that hard." I laughed it off. I was just telling a story. His hand squeezed mine a little too firmly. "I know. Just let me be the one who really knows you, okay?" The possessiveness should have made me pause. Instead, I kissed him, thinking it meant he cared. From then on, the comments grew sharper, but always wrapped in velvet. "Maybe wear something less revealing tonight. I don't like other men staring. You don't need makeup. I want the real you, not the mask. You don't have to hang out with Sophia so much. She's a bad influence." Little by little, my world shrank until Daniel was at the center of it. And I told myself that was love. Love meant sacrifice. Love meant choosing one person over everyone else. Then came the night he lost his temper. It was nothing really. I was late coming home from work traffic, a pileup on the freeway. I texted him, but he didn't respond. When I finally walked in the door, his face was tight, his eyes blazing. "Where the hell were you?" "I told you, traffic." "Do you think I'm stupid? Do you think I don't know when you're lying?" He slammed his hand against the wall right beside my head, not touching me. Not yet, but the sound rattled through my bones. I froze. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. Then, just as quickly, he softened. His hand slid down the wall to cup my cheek. "I'm sorry, baby. I can't stand the thought of losing you. You're everything to me." And like an idiot, I believed the apology more than the threat. That night, lying in his arms, I told myself he was passionate, not dangerous. I ignored the way my stomach twisted when his voice rose. I ignored the fact that I'd jumped at shadows walking to the car that evening, as if part of me already knew I was in trouble. But the next warning sign wasn't something I could brush aside. It happened the night he showed up at my job unannounced, waiting in the parking lot long after my shift ended. His smile was too wide, his grip on my arm too tight when he said, "Funny, you didn't mention working late tonight." I stammered an explanation. He kissed me hard enough to bruise, and when I got into his car, I noticed my coworkers staring from the windows. Their faces were uneasy. I should have run that night, should have packed my bags and never looked back. But love blinds you. Love convinces you that jealousy is devotion, that control is protection, that anger is just another form of passion. And by the time I realized the truth, I was already in too deep. The next thing he did still haunts me, because it wasn't just words anymore. It was something I couldn't ignore. Something that made me realize I might not survive this love at all. The first time Daniel actually hurt me, it felt almost accidental. Almost. We were in his kitchen, arguing over nothing, whether I told a co-worker about our weekend trip. He insisted I had, though I hadn't. The tension escalated, voices rising. I turned away to grab a glass of water, and suddenly his hand was on my wrist, yanking me back so hard the glass shattered in the sink. The pain shot through me like electricity. I gasped, staring at the red mark blooming across my skin. His face shifted instantly from fury to horror. "Baby, I'm sorry. I didn't mean God. I didn't mean to do that." He kissed the welt like his lips could erase it. "You know I'd never hurt you." And stupidly, I let him hold me while I shook. I told myself accidents happen, couples fight. Love isn't perfect. But that night, lying awake, I rubbed the tender bruise and wondered why his apologies sounded so rehearsed. The next morning, he showed up with flowers, breakfast, a handwritten note about how much he adored me. I tucked the note into my dresser drawer, too afraid to throw it away, too afraid to keep it. The cycle started then. Anger, apology, gifts, love bombing so intense it drowned out every rational thought. And every time, I convinced myself it was the last time. One evening, I called my mom. I didn't tell her everything, just that Daniel had a temper. "Sweetheart," she said carefully, "love isn't supposed to scare you." Her words lodged somewhere deep, but when Daniel overheard me on the phone, he wrapped his arms around me and whispered, "You don't need her filling your head with doubts. Families never understand love like ours." He kissed the top of my head. My pulse still raced from the fear of being caught, but I nodded, pretending to agree. Soon after, he started controlling money. At first, it was small. "Let me cover rent, babe. You don't need to stress." Then it was, "Why don't I handle the bills? You can focus on us." Eventually, my debit card stopped working because the account had changed. He handed me cash in envelopes like I was a child earning allowance. When I protested, he'd smile tightly. "This way, you don't have to worry about anything. I'll take care of you." The scariest part? A small piece of me liked the security. It felt like love, like protection. And that's how he trapped me. The real breaking point came one rainy Thursday night. I'd stayed late at work finishing a project. When I finally stepped into our apartment, dripping wet, Daniel was waiting on the couch. No TV on. No music. Just him. "Who were you with?" he asked, voice low. "Daniel, I was at work. You can call my boss." He stood so fast the coffee table rattled. "Do you think I don't know? I saw the way you smiled at that guy last week. Don't you dare lie to me." Before I could answer, his hand connected with my face. The sound cracked louder than the thunder outside. My vision blurred, my cheek burning, and for a moment I thought I might collapse. Silence followed. His chest heaved. Mine too. Then he crumbled, dropping to his knees, clutching my waist like I was his salvation. I'm sorry, please don't leave me. You're my whole life. I can't lose you." I stood frozen, tears mixing with the rain still dripping from my hair. Part of me screamed to run, to pack my things and never look back. But another part, the part he had been feeding for months, whispered that leaving would destroy him. And I couldn't carry the weight of that. Not yet. The next morning, I wore sunglasses to work. My coworker Emily asked if I was okay. I laughed it off, claiming a migraine. But I caught her glance linger too long, her lips pressed together like she knew. That night, Daniel surprised me with a bracelet. Silver, delicate, engraved with our initials. He slid it onto my wrist over the bruise that still ached. "Prove that we belong together," he murmured. I smiled weakly, but inside, my chest hollowed out. The lies were stacking too high. The bruises too many. I started keeping notes in my phone, hidden inside a folder labeled work receipts, dates, times, every outburst, every apology. My secret record of the truth. But secrecy couldn't save me forever. Because one night, Daniel found the folder. And that was when everything changed. I'll never forget the sound of his voice when he discovered the folder. It was late, past midnight. I'd fallen asleep on the couch with my phone tucked under a pillow. When I woke, the room was dark except for the glow of the screen in Daniel's hand. His face was lit from below, twisted in something I'd never seen before, pure betrayal, or maybe pure rage. "What is this?" His voice was quiet to quiet. My blood turned to ice. I sat up, trying to form words, but my mouth was dry. "Work receipts." He turned the phone toward me, scrolling through the entries. April 12 bruise on left wrist. April 27 slap across face. May 2 control over bank account. His eyes cut into me like knives. "You've been keeping score?" I tried to reach for the phone, but he yanked it back, holding it high. "You think I'm some kind of monster? You've been documenting me like I'm, what, an experiment?" "Daniel," my voice broke. "It's just for me. To remember. To what?" His laugh was sharp, bitter. "To use against me when you decide to destroy me." He hurled the phone across the room. It hit the wall, shattering, the sound making me flinch. His eyes followed the arc of its fall, then snapped back to me. "You don't love me," he whispered, shaking his head. "You never did. You're just waiting for your chance to run." I should have said yes. I should have ended it right there. But fear wrapped around my throat like barbed wire. "I love you," I whispered. "I swear I love you." His expression cracked. For a moment, I thought the storm had passed. He sank onto the couch beside me, burying his face in his hands. "Don't ever lie to me again," he murmured. But it wasn't a plea, it was a command. The next days blurred together. My broken phone stayed in a drawer. Daniel hovered closer than ever, checking my messages, asking where I was every hour. When I mentioned dinner with Sophia, he shook his head. "She puts ideas in your head. We don't need people like her. We just need us." I nodded, too exhausted to fight. But Sophia wasn't so easily erased. She showed up at my job one afternoon, pulling me into the break room with her fierce brown eyes narrowing at the sight of my fading bruise. "Enough," she said. "You're coming home with me." "I can't." My voice cracked. "You can." She touched my arm gently, her voice softening. "Please." The break room door swung open. Daniel stood there. He must have followed me. His smile was thin, practiced. Hi, Sophia. He slipped an arm around my waist, his fingers pressing just a little too hard. Thanks for checking in on her, but we're fine. Sophia looked between us, reading the truth in my eyes. Her lips parted like she wanted to fight, but she stayed silent. Daniel led me out, his grip unyielding. In the car, the silence was worse than shouting. He drove with one hand tight on the wheel, the other gripping my thighs so hard I felt the bruise forming beneath his fingers. Do you want me to be the villain? He asked finally, voice trembling. Because if you keep pushing, that's who I'll become. I stared at the window, tears slipping silently down my face. That night, he locked the door from the inside, kept the key in his pocket. Every time I moved, his eyes followed me. I felt like a prisoner in my own home. But prison walls can't hold secrets forever. 2 days later, when he left for groceries, I found the spare key he'd forgotten was taped under the sink. My hands shook as I stuffed a few clothes into a backpack. Heart pounding, I grabbed my wallet, the broken phone, anything I could carry. The front door was just steps away when I heard the sound of his car pulling into the lot. Tires crunching gravel. Panic shot through me. I darted into the bedroom, heart hammering, and shoved the bag under the bed. By the time he walked in, whistling, carrying a paper bag of fruit, I was sitting on the couch pretending to read a magazine. He kissed my forehead casually, like nothing had changed. But I knew now, I couldn't keep pretending. The next time I tried to leave, it would have to be for real. Because if he caught me again, I wasn't sure I'd survive it. I started planning my escape like someone planning a heist. Every detail mattered. At work, I hid cash from lunch breaks inside an old notebook no one touched. I asked Sophia to keep a bag of clothes at her apartment, just in case. I memorized bus routes, wrote down the number of a women's shelter I found online. But every time I thought I was ready, Daniel tightened the leash. He started driving me to work and picking me up. He wanted proof of where I was at all times. He even suggested we share a phone to save money, but I knew the real reason. He wanted my world contained in his pocket. I kept up the act, smiling, nodding, kissing him when his jealousy flared. Inside, I counted down the hours like a prisoner scratching lines on a cell wall. Then one night, everything nearly exploded. We were at a dinner with his co-workers. Daniel loved those nights, playing the perfect boyfriend, the charming gentleman. But when one of his colleagues, a woman named Claire, asked me a harmless question about my degree, I answered too enthusiastically. I laughed, maybe a little too freely. Daniel's smile never slipped in public, but I felt his hand clamp down on my thigh under the table. Hard. A warning. By the time we got home, the mask was gone. You humiliated me, he spat, pacing the living room. Daniel, I was just talking. Talking? Laughing? Do you know what they'll think? That you're flirting, that I can't control my own girlfriend. His face was red, his voice shaking with fury. He grabbed my arm and shoved me against the wall. My head snapped back, the plaster cracking behind me. For a moment, I saw stars, the world blurred. When my vision cleared, I saw something worse than anger in his eyes. I saw calm, cold, deliberate calm. This is your last chance, he whispered. Don't ever make me feel small again. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake beside him, my body rigid, listening to his even breathing. I thought about how close his rage had come to crossing a line that couldn't be undone. The next morning, he acted like nothing happened, made me coffee, kissed my cheek, asked if I wanted pancakes. I stared at him, wondering how someone could switch masks so easily. And for the first time, I wondered if he even knew who he really was. Sophia texted me that day, "You don't look okay. Please, let me help you." I typed back soon. That night, I decided I would leave within a week. But Daniel must have sensed something. Because suddenly, his apologies grew more desperate. He cried in my lap, telling me he couldn't live without me. He started talking about marriage, about kids, about forever. "You're all I have," he whispered one night, clutching me so tightly I couldn't breathe. "If you ever left, He stopped, but the silence finished the sentence. I smiled weakly, kissed his hair, and thought, I have to disappear before forever becomes my prison. The final straw came the following weekend. We were supposed to meet Sophia for brunch. I was excited, relieved even. But halfway there, Daniel pulled the car into a side street and parked. "You texted her too much this week," he said quietly. I froze. "What do you mean?" His hand shot out, gripping the back of my neck, forcing me to face him. I saw. Don't pretend. My phone had been locked. I'd been careful, or so I thought. "You went through my phone?" His grip tightened. "Your phone is mine." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. My vision blurred with panic. Then, as quickly as it began, he let go. His hand dropped, his voice soft again. "Cancel brunch. Let's just stay home." Something broke inside me then. A thin, fragile line that had been holding me together. I realized he would never stop. Not until I had nothing left. That night, when he finally fell asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my neck still burning where his hand had been. My heart pounded with a single, terrifying thought. If I didn't leave now, he was going to kill me. The night I finally ran, the rain was coming down in sheets. I'd hidden enough cash in my notebook at work to buy a bus ticket. I told Sophia everything, really everything, and she swore she'd keep her phone on all night. The plan was simple: wait until Daniel fell asleep, slip out quietly, and get to the station before he noticed. But nothing about that night felt simple. He'd been restless all evening, pacing, checking his phone, asking me strange questions in a voice that was too calm. Do you love me? Yes. Would you ever betray me? No. You'd never leave me, right? Of course not. Each answer tasted like poison on my tongue, but I forced a smile. If he suspected, if he saw one crack in the mask, I knew he wouldn't just grab my wrist this time. Finally, sometime after midnight, he drifted into sleep. His breathing deepened, steady and slow. I lay there for an hour listening, making sure. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might wake him. Then, barefoot, I slid out of bed. I grabbed the small bag I'd packed days earlier and tiptoed toward the door. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like a gunshot. When I reached the lock, my hands shook so badly I could barely turn the key. And then his voice, "Where are you going?" I froze. My lungs forgot how to work. Slowly, I turned. He was sitting up in bed, eyes wide open, watching me. I was just, "Don't lie." His voice was soft to soft. My body screamed run, but my legs wouldn't move. He got out of bed, walking toward me with deliberate steps, each one heavier than the last. "After everything I've done for you," he whispered, "this is how you thank me. By sneaking out like a thief." I wasn't. His hand shot out, slamming the door shut behind me. I felt the vibration through my spine. "You think I don't know?" His face was inches from mine now, his breath hot with rage. "You've been planning this. All those texts to Sophia, the cash missing. You think I wouldn't notice?" Panic surged. He knew. He'd always known. I needed air," I stammered. He tilted his head, studying me like I was a puzzle he was about to break apart. Then he smiled a smile that chilled me more than any scream. "You're mine," he said. "You'll always be mine." And then he locked the deadbolt, slipping the key into his pocket. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch while he lay back in bed, his arm draped over my pillow like a warning. Every second ticked louder than the rain outside. At dawn, when he finally went into the shower, I knew it was my only chance. I didn't think. I just ran. I grabbed my bag, yanked open the door, and bolted barefoot down the hallway, down the stairs, into the rain. I didn't stop until I reached a bus station, my clothes plastered to my skin, my breath tearing through my chest. Sophia was already there, her car idling, her face pale with fear. "Get in," she yelled, throwing the passenger door open. I collapsed into the seat, shaking so hard I could barely speak. She floored it out of the lot, checking the mirrors like we were being chased. And maybe we were. We drove straight to the police station. My voice trembled as I told the officer everything, the bruises, the control, the threats. Sophia sat beside me, her hand gripping mine, her eyes begging them to believe me. The officer listened, nodded, typed. But when he asked if I had photos, evidence, anything beyond my word, my stomach sank. My phone was shattered. My notes were gone. Daniel had made sure of it. Still, they filed a report, issued a temporary restraining order, told me to stay with Sophia while they looked into it. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. But hope is fragile, and Daniel wasn't done with me yet. Because 2 nights later, I woke up at Sophia's to the sound of tapping on the window. And when I looked out into the darkness, I saw him, standing in the rain, smiling. At first, I thought I was dreaming. The glass was cold under my fingertips as I leaned closer, my breath fogging the window. And there he was, Daniel, standing in the downpour, his shirt clinging to his chest, hair plastered to his face, smiling. Not the soft smile I'd once loved. No, this was something darker. A smile that said he wasn't afraid anymore, that he'd already won. I stumbled back from the window, my heart hammering so loud I was sure Sophia could hear it in the next room. "Wake up," I hissed, shaking her shoulder. She groaned, confused. "What?" "He's here." My voice cracked. "Outside." Her eyes snapped open. She rushed to the window, but by then, the yard was empty. Just rain falling, splattering against the glass. "He was there," I insisted, tears blurring my vision. "I swear to God, Sophia, he was right there." She grabbed her phone and called the police. Her hands were steadier than mine. Minutes crawled by like hours until flashing red and blue lights lit up the street. 2 officers swept the property. They found nothing, no footprints in the mud, no figure lurking in the shadows. Just wet grass and my trembling body. "Could have been a nightmare," one officer said gently. "After what you've been through, that wouldn't be unusual." But I knew it wasn't a nightmare. I knew the curve of that smile too well. Sophia believed me, though. She didn't say it out loud, but I saw it in the way she double-checked every lock, the way she pulled the curtains shut tight, the way she slid a kitchen knife under her pillow before we went back to bed. Neither of us slept. The next morning, I went back to the police station, demanding to speak to the officer who took my report. I told him about the window, about Daniel standing there, about the smile. He nodded sympathetically, but his words felt like ice water. Without a violation of the restraining order, without evidence, we can't do much. He knows where the line is, and he knows how not to cross it. He was right. Daniel was careful. Always careful. But careful didn't mean harmless. That night, Sophia and I stayed at her cousin's apartment across town. We thought changing locations would shake him off. But when we came back 2 days later, the first thing I noticed was the smell. Gasoline. The odor clung to the air inside Sophia's apartment, sharp and suffocating. And then I saw it. A matchbook on the kitchen counter. A matchbook from the diner Daniel and I used to go to every Sunday morning. My knees buckled. Sophia caught me before I hit the floor. We called the police again. This time, they took it seriously. They dusted for prints, collected the matchbook, asked if I wanted emergency shelter placement. Yes, I whispered. Anywhere he can't find me. That night, I was placed in a safe house for women escaping abuse. It was small, hidden in a quiet neighborhood, no sign on the door. Just a nondescript house with blinds always drawn. For the first time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I was out of his reach. But safety doesn't erase fear. Fear follows you. It sits at the edge of the bed. It whispers every time the floor creaks, every time the wind rattles the shutters. I kept waiting for him to find me. And then, one evening, he did. I'd stepped outside to take a breath of fresh air, to feel the cold night against my skin. The porch light buzzed overhead. The street was empty still. Until I saw it. A piece of paper tucked under the wiper of one of the shelter's cars. I pulled it free with shaking hands. My name was scrawled across it in Daniel's handwriting. 2 words beneath it. Found you. My stomach dropped. I stumbled back inside, locking the door, clutching the paper like it might burn me. The staff called the police immediately. They promised they'd put a car outside, that I wasn't alone. But the truth settled in my bones. He would never stop. Not until one of us was gone. And in that moment, I knew exactly who it had to be. The words burned in my hands. Found you. I sat on the shelter's narrow bed, staring at that scrap of paper, my chest hollow and shaking. Around me, the other women whispered in low voices, their faces a mirror of my own fear. But none of them had Daniel. None of them had a man who smiled while he hunted. The staff tried to reassure me. The police car parked outside, the deadbolts reinforced, the emergency numbers taped by every phone. But safety on paper doesn't erase danger in flesh. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every sound outside made me jump. Every shadow stretched long and sharp. 3 nights later, I found out why. The police car was gone. They'd been called away to a burglary across town. It was supposed to be temporary, less than an hour. I tried to calm myself, repeating, "They'll be back. It's fine. You're fine." But then the back porch light flickered. Once, twice, out. My body went cold. I crept toward the window, heart hammering, and saw him, standing at the edge of the yard, just beyond the reach of the street lamp, watching, waiting. I couldn't breathe, couldn't even scream. One of the staff members, Carla, noticed me frozen at the glass. She followed my gaze and cursed under her breath. She called 911, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped the phone. But by the time the police arrived, he was gone. Again. It became a pattern. He'd appear in flashes outside the shelter, at the grocery store across the street, once even across from the courthouse when I met with my advocate. Always far enough away to avoid arrest. Always close enough to remind me that I belonged to him. The restraining order might as well have been confetti. And I realized then, the law wouldn't save me. So I made a choice. A dangerous, desperate choice. I started keeping a knife under my pillow. Sophia smuggled me pepper spray. I even thought about the gun her cousin offered, but the idea of holding one made my hands sweat. Still, I knew if it came down to it, I'd need something more than locks and paperwork. One night, unable to sleep, I called my mom. We hadn't spoken much since this all began. I didn't want her to know how bad it had gotten, but when she answered, her voice soft with sleep, I broke down. "Mom, I'm scared he's going to kill me." There was silence, then a shaky inhale. "Sweetheart, come home, please. We'll figure it out together." But I couldn't. Daniel knew where my parents lived. He'd been there for Christmas. He'd sat at their table, carving the turkey like a son-in-law. Bringing him anywhere near them felt like betrayal. So I lied. "I'm okay, Mom. I just needed to hear your voice." She didn't believe me, but she didn't push. The next morning, I decided it was time to fight back in the only way I could. Evidence. If the law wanted proof, I'd give it to them. I bought a cheap phone with cash. Something Daniel couldn't track. I downloaded a recording app and kept it running whenever I left the shelter. Sophia helped me set up a small camera hidden in my bag, pointed through a discreet hole in the fabric. For weeks, I gathered everything. His car parked too close. His shadow outside. His voice once, whispering my name through the crack of a window. Each clip was another piece of the cage he was building around me. But Daniel must have sensed a shift. Because the next time I saw him, he didn't keep his distance. It was late evening, and I'd stayed late at work trying to reclaim some normal life. I walked out into the dim parking lot, clutching my bag tight. And there he was, leaning against my car like he owned it. "Baby," he said softly, smiling that same terrifying smile. "Why are you hiding from me?" My throat closed. My legs screamed to run, but I forced myself to stand tall. "You're not supposed to be here." He tilted his head. "And yet, here I am, because you belong with me." I hit record on my phone, praying my shaking hands wouldn't give me away. "Leave me alone, Daniel." He stepped closer, his shadow swallowing mine. "Or what? You'll call the cops again? You think they can keep us apart? You think a piece of paper means anything?" His voice dropped colder. "If I can't have you, no one will." Something in me snapped. I raised my bag between us like a shield and screamed at the top of my lungs. The sound echoed across the lot. A security guard rounded the corner, shouting. Daniel froze. His smile faltered. Then he slipped into the shadows and was gone. But this time, I had him. His words, his threat, recorded. And I knew exactly what I had to do next. The recording felt like a lifeline. His voice, low and venomous. If I can't have you, no one will. For months I'd been dismissed, doubted, told I was exaggerating. But now I had proof. Sophia and I went straight to the police station. My hands trembled as I handed over the phone, the guard's incident report, everything I had collected. The detective listened to the recording, her eyes narrowing. For the first time, I saw real concern on her face. This is enough, she said firmly. We'll press charges, stalking, harassment, violation of the restraining order. And with that threat on record, we can push for attempted coercion, maybe even terroristic threats. The words should have felt like victory. Instead, they felt like the tightening of a noose. Because if Daniel knew I'd given the police that recording, he'd come for me harder than ever. The detective promised protection, patrol cars, court dates, safety plans. But I'd learned the hard way that protection on paper doesn't stop a man who lives for control. That night at the shelter, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, staring into the dark, waiting for the flicker of his shadow. My body hummed with fear, my chest too tight to breathe. And then, like a whisper in my head, another thought came. What if I didn't just defend myself? What if I ended this permanently? The idea terrified me, but it also gave me something I hadn't felt in months. Power. I didn't tell Sophia. She still believed the system could work. She believed justice was possible if we just held out long enough. But I knew better. Daniel wasn't going to stop until one of us was buried. The trial was set for 6 weeks later. 6 weeks of waiting, of watching my back, of feeling him just beyond the corner of every street. And then, out of nowhere, he disappeared. No sightings, no phone calls, no notes, nothing. The silence was worse than the stalking. Because silence meant planning. The police said maybe he'd finally realized he was cornered. Maybe he'd run. But I didn't believe that for a second. Daniel didn't run. Daniel hunted. 2 weeks into the silence, Sophia and I stopped at her apartment to grab clothes. The moment I walked through the door, my skin prickled. Something was off. The picture frames on her wall shifted. My bag unzipped. A faint smell of cedar cologne clung to the air. He'd been here. I found the note on her nightstand, written in his sharp, deliberate handwriting. See you soon. I collapsed onto the floor, the paper shaking in my hands. Sophia swore, dialing the detective again. But I knew no squad car would make me feel safe now. That night, I made a decision. A brutal, irreversible decision. If Daniel came for me again, I wouldn't run. I wouldn't beg. I would finish it. Sophia's cousin, ex-military, met me in the alley behind his garage. He didn't ask questions, just handed me a small revolver wrapped in cloth. Only use it if you have no other choice, he said. But if you do, don't hesitate. The weight of it in my hand was terrifying. Heavy. Final. I tucked it into the bottom of my bag, praying I'd never need it. But I knew I would. The night it happened started quiet. Too quiet. I was staying alone. Sophia had a night shift. The shelter was full, and her apartment felt safer than being crammed into a room with strangers. I triple-checked the locks, pulled the curtains shut, kept the revolver on the table beside me. Midnight came. Rain tapped against the glass. My eyelids grew heavy. And then footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. The door handle rattled. Once. Twice. My blood turned to ice. I grabbed the revolver with shaking hands, aiming it at the door. My heart slammed against my ribs, every muscle screaming to run, but there was nowhere left to run. Baby, his voice called softly through the door. Calm. Loving. Open up. Let's talk. Tears blurred my vision. Go away! I screamed, my voice breaking. You don't mean that. His tone was smooth, coaxing. You're scared. But I'll make it better. Just open the door. Then the sound of keys. He had one. Somehow he had one. The lock clicked. I aimed, my whole body shaking, my finger hovering on the trigger. The door swung open, and Daniel stepped inside. The moment he stepped into the apartment, the air shifted. Daniel stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his jacket, eyes locked on me. Calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that came before a storm that destroys everything in its path. You don't have to point that at me, he said softly, nodding at the revolver trembling in my hands. I'm not here to hurt you. My throat burned with fear. Stay back. He closed the door behind him, sliding the bolt shut with a casual flick. If I wanted to hurt you, I would have already. I just want us to talk, like we used to. My hands shook so violently the gun wavered. There's nothing left to say. His smile twisted. Oh, there's everything left to say. You think you can destroy me with your lies? With your recordings? Baby, I made you. Without me, you're nothing. Stop calling me that. I spat, surprising myself with the strength in my voice. For the first time, his expression cracked. A flicker of rage flashed through his calm exterior. He took one step closer. I cocked the hammer. The sound echoed in the small room like thunder. He froze. His chest rose and fell, his eyes never leaving mine. You don't have it in you, he whispered. You're weak. That's why you need me. That's why you'll always need me. Every word was a chain tightening around my throat. I thought of Sophia, sleeping through her shift with no idea he was here. I thought of my mom, begging me to come home. I thought of all the nights I lay awake, shaking, praying he wouldn't find me. And then I thought of me, the version of me before Daniel, the woman who laughed too loud, who wore bright dresses, who danced in her kitchen just because. That woman was gone, because of him. No, I said, my voice trembling but steady enough. I don't need you. I never did. He lunged. Instinct took over. My finger squeezed the trigger. The sound was deafening. My arms jolted back. Daniel staggered, shock flashing across his face before he collapsed onto the floor, clutching his shoulder. For a second, the world went silent. Then he laughed. Low, broken. You really did it. Blood seeped between his fingers, pooling on the hardwood. He tried to crawl toward me, dragging himself inch by inch, leaving a dark trail behind him. I love you, he hissed through clenched teeth. Even now, you'll see, you'll come back. I backed away, the revolver still pointed, my body shaking uncontrollably. The neighbors must have heard. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. Blue and red lights flashed through the curtains. Doors slammed. Shouts filled the hallway. When the police burst in, guns drawn, I dropped the revolver like it was burning me. My hands flew to the air, tears blinding me. He broke and he had a key, I had too. They separated us instantly. Medics rushed to Daniel, pressing gauze against his wound. He kept smiling at me, even as they strapped him to the stretcher. We'll always be together, baby, he murmured. You'll never be free. Those words haunted me long after they wheeled him out. At the station, I gave my statement, every detail tumbling out between sobs. The detective listened carefully, nodding, promising me I'd done the right thing. Self-defense. Clear as day. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Even as dawn broke, painting the sky pale gray, I felt his shadow clinging to me. They released me to Sophia that morning. She wrapped me in her arms so tightly I thought my ribs might crack, whispering, "You're safe now. It's over." But I knew it wasn't over. Not really. Because Daniel wasn't dead. And men like him don't stop until they take everything. Daniel survived. The bullet had torn through his shoulder, missing anything fatal. At the hospital, he charmed the nurses with shaky smiles and whispered jokes. He told anyone who would listen that it was all a lover's quarrel, that I'd overreacted. The detectives knew better. They had my recordings, my reports, the restraining order he'd violated. Still, it didn't stop him from trying to twist the story, painting me as the hysterical girlfriend who couldn't handle passion. His trial began 6 months later. 6 months of hell. During those months, I lived like a ghost. Therapy appointments blurred into police interviews. I jumped every time a car slowed near Sophia's apartment. My hands trembled when the mail slot clattered, terrified a note would slide through. But when I finally sat in that courtroom and saw him sitting there in a suit, bandaged arm in a sling, smirking at me like I still belonged to him, something inside me hardened. He looked at me like nothing had changed. Like the bullet, the police, the evidence, it was all just another chapter in our twisted love story. But I wasn't the same woman anymore. When it was my turn to testify, I stood tall, even though my knees shook beneath me. I told the jury everything, every bruise, every threat, every smile that turned into a cage. The defense tried to rattle me, tried to paint me as unstable, jealous, manipulative. Why didn't you leave sooner? They asked. I looked at them, my voice steady for the first time in months. Because love blinds you. It makes you believe the chains are jewelry. It makes you believe pain is proof of devotion. I stayed because I thought it was love. But it wasn't. It was control. It was violence. And I refused to call that love anymore. The courtroom was silent. Even the judge leaned forward slightly, listening. Daniel didn't smile then. After 3 weeks of testimony, the verdict came back. Guilty. On all counts. Stalking, harassment, assault, violation of a protective order. He was sentenced to 10 years. 10 years. The day they led him away in handcuffs, he turned one last time to look at me. His lips moved silently. I'll be back. And I knew he meant it. But for the first time, his words didn't chain me. They didn't make me shrink. Because I realized something vital. Even if he came back, I would never be the woman he broke again. I started therapy twice a week. I rebuilt my life brick by brick, tiny victories stacked against the ruins he left behind. I got a new apartment with locks only I controlled. I cut my hair, bought clothes that made me feel powerful again. Sophia never left my side. She reminded me on the bad days that survival itself was victory. That breathing freely was enough. But it wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about reclaiming myself. One evening, months after the trial, I stood in front of the mirror, tracing the faint scar on my wrist from that first bruise he left. For years, I'd hidden it. Now, I let it show. Because it wasn't just a scar. It was proof. Proof that I'd endured. Proof that love hadn't destroyed me, no matter how hard it tried. People ask me now, when did love blind you to all the warning signs? And I tell them the truth. It wasn't love. Love doesn't slam you against walls. Love doesn't track your every step. Love doesn't whisper threats in the dark and call it devotion. What I mistook for love was a cage. A trap dressed in flowers and apologies. The day I pulled that trigger, I didn't just save my life. I ended the illusion that I needed him to feel whole. That was the day I stopped recognizing who I was. And the day I began again,